the GST Appellate Tribunals, known as GSTAT, Key Legal and Practical Analysis. So, ASSOCHAM is organizing this program in association with Khetan and Company, our partner for this program. We have with us Mr. Sudipta Bhattacharjee, partner Indirect Taxes, Khetan and Company, who is also a member of our Indirect Tax Council of ASSOCHAM. We are also joined by Mr. Nitin Goyal, who is the co-chairman of our Indirect Tax Council and also the senior vice president and group Indirect Tax head of Wellspun Group. So before I hand over this session to our co-chair, I would like to inform all the participants to keep ready their questions. They can post the questions in the Q&A box, which will be answered by our expert once his PPT will get over. So with this word, I will request Mr. Nitin Goyal to give the opening remarks and some industry perspective on this issue. Over to you, Nitin.
Yeah. Hi, good evening, everyone. So first of all, thanks everyone for joining this session. So from ASSOCHAM side, it is always our endeavor to bring these kind of sessions to all our members and address the kind of issues which they are facing. Now, when we talk of from an industry perspective, look, when we talk of tax litigations, so it is a reality. So while from an industry perspective, we always endeavor to minimize the litigations, but it is a reality that look, till the time tax is going to be there, there are going to be tax litigations which are going to be there around. Now, one important thing which I have seen even within our group is that look, there is a strong level of governance which is now happening even at the board level on how the litigation matters are moving, what is the movement, how those matters are getting addressed, whether we are adopting the right approach so that the matters gets concluded. So in fact, we internally have a practice where we make a presentation to all our boards every 6 months. So, so that's the kind of a view which the industry is having. Now coming specifically to GSTAT, so while initially when the GSTAT was constituted, there was a number of some 4 lakh appeals which was touted that this is pending because the GSTAT is not constituted. But looking at the numbers which are available on the GSTAT website, till yesterday it is only around 2,500 appeals which have been filed. So either those numbers were wrong. So even if it is say not 4 lakhs, 2 lakhs, I still feel that the pace of filings is a bit slow from an industry perspective, because at the end of the day, if we are going to go to the legal counsels at the last minute, we can't expect that kind of a quality, or we may have some troubleshooting issues on the GSTAT website. So my team tells me that look, in terms of the filings as well of the appeals on the GSTAT website, there are certain challenges which are there. So that I would say that look, we can very well expect that like how the GSTN improved since 2017. So we can expect a similar process with the GSTAT website as well. So all in all, my request would be that look, for all your pending appeals, you should prioritize the filings, because the faster we do the filings of appeals, the faster they are going to come up for hearings, and then our matters are either going to be addressed, or in case there is a difference of view, they would logically move on to the next level of litigation. So with these words, I would hand it over to my co-speaker, Mr. Sudipta, to take over the presentation.
Thank you, Nitin. Thanks, Avinash, and a very warm welcome to all of you who have logged in. GSTAT, needless to say, it's been 9 years almost in the making. Is one of the biggest, most significant developments, and coming close on the heels of GST 2.0. One hopes that this is a reform that will take us a long way towards a good and simple tax. Where does GSTAT fit in terms of the overall litigation structure? If you look at the 2 types of litigation under GST, one is taxpayer initiated, which has been quite prevalent, at least in the initial years, where we file advanced ruling, go to the AAAR or appellate authority, and then move high courts on a writ. I mean, this was one of the strategies adopted for many industry issues where a relatively expedited certainty of tax position was sought to be opted for. And department initiated, again, all of us are familiar, whether it's an audit, investigating wing, then you have the show cause notice reply, adjudication order, first appeal. And this is where, after the first appeal, was where everything was getting stuck because you did not have a forum for the second appeal. The high courts were getting flooded with writ petitions. And of course, we are all grateful as members of the GST ecosystem that high courts did step in. Thousands of orders have been passed by high courts, very fair, largely. So there is no complaint on that. But of course, high courts going to, replacing a stage of appeal with writ as a strategy comes with its own limitations, right? Because writ is an exceptional remedy. You can't, for every small thing, every issue of reconciliation, every factual issue, you can't go on to a. Am I audible clearly? I see a remark saying the voice is not clear.
So for us, the voice is very clear. Maybe there's some network issue at their end. So your voice is clear to us.
Okay, okay, thank you. So yeah, as I was saying that, I remember reading somewhere that almost 80% of GST issues or litigations are pertaining to reconciliations. I'm of course broad basing it, probably a bit of oversimplification, but a lot of it arises from reconciliation issues. Now, of course, there is a limitation to how far you can go to a writ petition against a reconciliation issue, which is purely numbers driven, accounting driven, books driven, document driven. uh, and which is where the GSTAT as a development, as the commencement of GSTAT's operation, we are all looking forward to. Why was there a delay? I will not spend too much time on it, but just quickly to recap, there was a constitutional challenge by the Revenue Bar Association in 2018 because the idea was that the format in which it was originally brought in, the technical number of technical members in GSTAT was more than judicial members. So independence of judiciary was something that it was felt that that basic principle was not adhered to. Madras High Court intervened, struck it down, and amendments in law were brought in by the Finance Act 23. There was one more petition by Revenue Bar Association on the very specific point of non-eligibility of lawyers as judicial members. While Supreme Court issued notice, GST Council on its own motion amended the CGST Act to take care of that aspect as well. Thereafter, things have started moving. I wish I could say things have started moving fast. It has not. But there has been some movement. I mean, in December 23, we had the notification for Constitution of Principal Bench in New Delhi. May 24, Justice Sanjay Mishra was appointed as the president. July 24, the notification was issued for constitution of the principal bench along with 31 state benches at 45 locations all over India. And April 25, roughly a year ago, the GSTAT procedure rules got notified. So this is the current structure. We have GSTAT, the principal bench in Delhi, and the state benches. For both, there are a total of 4 members, 2 judicial members, 2 technical members, 1 technical member center, 1 technical member state. At the principal bench, the senior most judicial member is the president, which is Justice Mishra, as we saw. One, the senior most member from all the state benches all over India will be appointed as the vice president, and the vice president will be able to exert a lot of the powers that the president itself has. To the best of my knowledge, no vice president has been notified as yet. Appeal from GSTAT principal bench will go directly to Supreme Court. From state benches, we will have a first appeal to High Court and the second appeal from there to Supreme Court. The approach, the design of GSTAT, as many of us would have heard so far, is digital first. It is exclusively intended to be a online forum. Filing, every notices, everything is online. The portal is efiling.gstat.gov.in, but it is unfortunately not integrated with GSTIN. What that means is there is no automatic scraping of GSTIN, the data that is already there in GSTIN. So anything and everything that as a SSE you might want to rely upon in appeal, you will have to manually upload in the GSTAT e-filing portal. Maybe eventually, few years from now, that integration will happen. We so far don't even have proper integration between IceGate and GSTAT. So we look forward to that day. But as on date, this is the centralized gateway for GSTAT, which is not integrated with GSTIN. And like Nitin highlighted, one needs to be very, very mindful of our experience in 2017-18 vis-a-vis the GST portal. We remember all the portal glitches, we remember all the hiccups. Uh, so what do we do? I think two things or two or three things that we must remember in this regard. One, keep extensive screenshots. So at any stage where you face a GSTAT portal glitch, whether in terms of timeout, whether in terms of error, keep detailed screenshots to show that there is a genuine inability on your part for no fault of yours to file a particular appeal. There is a grievance redressal link in the GSTAT portal as well, where you can log in. So in suitable cases, do file, do raise a ticket, because that also goes to show your bona fide, goes to show your efforts. And thirdly, if you are at the cusp, if you are standing on 28th June, do not just blame the GSTAT portal. Please file manually or send an email to the relevant authority that here is the PDF for filing, because at least that will show your effort taken, your bona fides in terms of filing. It will not be treated as something where you were sleeping on your rights. A question might come: how do I pay the pre-deposit if I file manually or if I file through the portal? If we can't go to Bharat Kosh and generate the pre-deposit receipt for some reason, challan for some reason, then in the same manual filing, include a letter saying that this is why I have forced to file manually. I could not fill up the pre-deposit for so and so reason. You guide us. We are happy to do it in the next 3 to 4 days. The reason behind all of this is to establish your bona fide. Tomorrow, if for some reason you want to approach the GSTAT bench, you want to approach a high court to say that I cannot be debarred from pursuing an appellate remedy, you need to show that you have come with clean hands, that you have taken all the necessary efforts to ensure that an appeal gets filed. I think all of us have gone through enough experience during the GST portal stage in 17-18. So let's use that experience. Let's not forget that experience. Uh, in terms of timelines, of course, till about April 1st, 2026, any orders that you receive till then, which is basically in the next 17-18 days. 30th June is the timeline for filing. Anything there from April onwards, the filing of appeal will have to be done within 3 months of communication. Nitin was alluding to the fact that around 4.8 or 5 lakh appeals were expected to be filed. And this is the number that we have heard repeated again and again. But this is the status from the GSTT website, the screenshot that you see from today morning, only 2,436. So less than 0.5% of that number. Now, it could be because people are waiting, as we often do, for the last moment, because there is a lot of time left for 30th June. It could also be because a lot of people are finding it very difficult to file. I hear a lot of portal glitches are happening, and that could have deterred people from filing, on the GSTT portal. The principal bench at Delhi is fully functional, and they have passed the first substantive GST appellate order, GSTAT appellate order on 11th February. We'll talk about that as we go forward. Moving on, in terms of where we stand today, from what I hear on ground, benches in Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, Bengaluru, and Ahmedabad are either ready or nearly ready for commencement of hearings by April 26. Even though the technical member state has not been appointed by most states. We had an office order in December, 26 December, by which 83 members all over India were appointed. But a lot of state benches still don't have the technical member state. From what I have heard, Cuttack, Patna, Mumbai, and Lucknow are the rare state benches where all four required members are in place. I think a lot of other states have to do a lot of catching up. Interesting point to remember is Bombay High Court Goa bench in the case of VS Products specifically said that when the state bench is not in operation, the petitioner could very well approach the principal bench. So if you have an appeal which is on the cusp of hearing, which is ripe for hearing, and you want it to get heard, maybe this is the right time for you to push and move the principal bench. Because currently the pendency is low, they will have a lot of time to give to your matter, and this may be a strategy worth exploring. In fact, the first judgment that has come out from GSTAT in the case of Sterling Wilson was originally from Orissa. They should have ordinarily gone to Orissa State Bench, but at that time the bench was not functional, and which is why it came to the principal bench. Based on, in fact, this particular judgment has been quoted in that judgment, in the first judgment as well. Physical infrastructure remains patchy, bit improvised. I mean, I think the Delhi State Bench is also operating from temporary hotel premises. But of course, these are teething issues. In 2 to 3 years' time, I think things will really stabilize. We have had the experience, like what Nitin was alluding to, from the GSTN portal. One important thing that we now need to remember is, I started by mentioning that thousands of writ petitions were filed because the GSTAT was not in place. What happens to those? A lot of high courts are now creating batches where writs were admitted on the specific premise that GSTAT is not yet in force. All of them are likely to be remanded back to the relevant jurisdictional GSTAT once they start functioning. There may be writs that you have filed which forms part of that list. What needs to be very, very carefully navigated is to ensure that today, if you are enjoying a particular interim relief from High Court, for example, if you have not been asked to pay any sort of pre-deposit, or you have been asked to pay, say, a minimal amount as pre-deposit, do you continue to get the benefit when it is sent back to the GSTAT? Is it worthwhile to ask the High Court to ensure that the GSTAT must hear your appeal in the same terms and conditions as the High Court was hearing? So I think this is a call that one needs to take. Also, in some cases, the limitation would also be important, and hence it would be critical to ask the High Court when it is sending it back to GSTAT that please exclude the time spent before High Court for the purposes of limitation. So I think these two things would be very important to track. Now let's quickly look at the legal and constitutional foundation of GSTAT. Constitutionally, it flows from Article 323B of the Constitution of India, which pertains to tribunals. Appropriate legislature can, create provisions for adjudication of disputes on specific subjects by tribunals. And one of the subjects that is included in the Constitution is levy, assessment, collection, and enforcement of any tax under Article 323B2. As a drop down from 323B2, we have the specific provisions in CGST Act, sections 109, 10, 11, 12, 13. What I really want to emphasize qua section 109 is GSTAT is a single central appellate tribunal with benches all over India, much like SESTAT and unlike VAT tribunals, because VAT tribunals drew their legitimacy from individual state VAT legislations. One VAT tribunal's judgment was not binding on another VAT tribunal in another state. It was persuasive, but not binding. Unlike SESTAT, where judgment of a coordinate bench is binding. So if a SESTAT bench wants to take a differing view from another bench, it needs to technically refer it to a larger bench. Were there not instances where contradictory decisions were taken? Yes, but all of them led to formation of a larger bench where some sort of a final direction emerged. That will apply squarely vis-a-vis GSTAT as well. So if there is any position that has been taken by one particular bench and a different bench wants to take a different view, it has to be referred to a larger bench. This is a very, very crucial distinction, and this bear in mind that when GSTAT was first envisaged in the GST model law, when it came out, it was expected to be a two-tier structure. Under CGST Act, you will have principal bench, and under each state GST law, you would have a state bench, which was like the VAT law model. But that was specifically departed from. And if you today look at the various state GST laws, legislations, and if you look at these respective corresponding provisions, 109, 110, etc., they all cross-refer to CGST Act. So the source of law for GST tribunal is the CGST Act, read with the Constitution. There is nothing that they draw from the state GST laws in this regard. This is purely driven by the CGST Act. Moving on, what can the GSTAT hear? Obviously, it can hear second appeals, appeals by taxpayers on the department against orders of the appellate authority, Section 107 orders, or the revisional authority. But what are the appeals? And this is true for all benches of GSTAT. But what are the things that only the principal bench of GSTAT can hear? Where one of the issues in a particular appeal pertains to place of supply. So there could be 3-4 issues. There could be issue 174 versus 73. There could be any other issue. But if one of the questions of law involved is place of supply, then it will definitely have to be heard by the principal bench. This flows from the section itself, from the law itself. Interestingly, there was a notification that was issued on 17th September 2025, which specified of 2-3 other areas which also must exclusively be heard by principal bench. What are they? OIDR services. So OIDR services provided by foreign websites, platforms, etc. to Indians within India. Any dispute qua that has to be heard by the principal bench. Any online money gaming services provided from outside India to Indians has to be heard by the principal bench. Any ISD distribution related issue under Section 20 has to be heard by the principal bench. And this is very important. Case pending before 2 or more state benches where the president is satisfied that an identical question of law is involved has to be heard by the principal bench. What it means for us SSEs is that it gives us a right to file transfer petitions or applications akin to transfer petitions in Supreme Court. Some of you would know that in many cases, when similar matters are pending before multiple high courts, people file transfer petitions to the Supreme Court to consolidate everything, either before the Supreme Court or before any specific high court. Similar concept now exists under the GST Appellate Tribunal, where, and this is particularly important for anyone with operations across India, anyone who has registrations in more than one state. If you know that a particular issue is going to be litigated across more than one state, be on the lookout for this provision. The moment you have filed 2 appeals on the same issue, you can file an application before the president of the GSTAT to say that these are on identical issues, evaluate and please pull it together before the GSTAT principal bench of GSTAT for a consolidated hearing. I think this could be one of the ways where one can try and avoid multiplicity of litigation, contradictory rulings, etc. And the last one, this would have a limited use case. This flows from an amendment that came in the law in the last budget. It is not yet in force, but this is in the context of, say, a same legal entity has 2 different appellate authority of advanced rulings, AAAR rulings, in 2 different states. In that sort of a contradictory scenario, it can approach the GSTAT, and GSTAT can act as a national appellate authority for advanced ruling to resolve those sort of resolve those sort of issues. This is not yet in force. I don't know how widespread the use case for this would be, but yes, I mean, worth noting once this comes into force for certain specific cases. The principal bench also has original jurisdiction vis-a-vis anti-profiteering matters. So complaints pertaining to the period prior to pre-April 1, 2025. Because bear in mind, after April 1, 25, no one can file a complaint of anti-profiteering. But 171 still remains, and GSTAT has the power to suo moto commence an investigation. But of course, that is likely to happen only in rare cases. In most other cases, complaints for the pre-April period will be heard and is being heard regularly by the GST Appellate Tribunal. Coming to the tricky issue of pre-deposits. There is obviously a mandatory pre-deposit of 10% of the disputed tax, capped at 20 crore. So you would pay the first 10% at a first appeal level before Commission of Appeals, and the second before GSTAT. This is of course a reduced amount. Earlier, the cap was 50 crores and 20%. So thankfully this is reduced, but this is still a lot. I think a lot of people, especially in the MSME space, will really struggle with giving. And this is something that we have raised from ASSOCHAM earlier also with the government, that this is prohibitive. We shouldn't make the right of appeal such a difficult one, such a high threshold one. Connected point is, if you win, you can get it back. This pre-deposit will be refundable with interest. but there is some amount of doubt as to whether the rate of interest would be 6 or 9%. If you look at the GSTAT related provision, it links you back to section 56, but that linkage is a little unhappy one because we are not very clear under which subclause of 56 will fall into, and hence 6 or 9 I think remains a bit of ambiguity. And this is something that we would represent and request the government to clarify, government or GSTT as the case may be, to clarify. But yes, it will come back with an interest, and of course once you pay the pre-deposit, the remainder of the tax demand will be stayed till disposal. Connected point one, can pre-deposit be paid through credit instead of cash? This issue has gone to several high courts, and I think almost unanimously most high courts have said yes. This is only logical that it should be payable by credit. Could this still be an issue in your filings? It can come up at least at a registry level. They might flag it as a defect. I'm hoping that once it goes to the GSTAT bench, they will follow the favorable high court orders and allow paying through credit. I think there is a judgment from Supreme Court also, not a detailed judgment, but I think a SLP against one of the High Court judgment was dismissed. So I'm quite hopeful that this should stop remaining an issue still, and credit should be usable for making this pre-deposit seamlessly. Another connected point, very, very critical for individuals who have a penalty charge against them, and a lot of show cause notices by default include a personal penalty against taxed, against anyone who was in charge. Now, if it was only aiding and abetting penalty, it's only some 25,000 or 50,000 rupees, which is okay. But if they charge that the individual in question has retained the benefit of a particular tax evasion, then it's 100% liability. And that could be staggering. I mean, last year, I remember Bombay High Court intervened in a scenario where against a particular SSC, there was 1,000 crore demand. So, that's just impossible for an individual to deal with it. To be honest, even a 20 crore cap, I don't know many salaried individuals who would be able to meet that. But there is a ambiguity that if you look at the pre-deposit provisions, it says 10% of the disputed tax amount subject to a cap, provided that for someone who is only facing a penalty issue, the pre-deposit would be 10% of the penalty amount. Does the cap get automatically borrowed for the proviso, or the proviso exists on its own? Not very clear. I would think, strictly legally speaking, if I have to interpret, I would say that the cap should be applicable to the proviso, because otherwise the proviso will be violative of Article 14, right to equality. You can't have an individual worse off than a corporate taxpayer in the context of pre-deposits. So to that extent, I'm hopeful that this is another aspect which will get clarified. But till then, I mean, we need to be ready for this sort of a issue being faced. Lastly, what happens if in the course of investigation I have paid some amounts under protest? Can I get adjustment of that? Again, there are high court judgments which give you favorable answers to that question. Under GST law, there was a circular a couple of years back where a DRC 03A route was introduced, by which if you have paid any amounts under DRC 03, you could use that as a set off against pre-deposit liability. The question is, if you look at the genesis of that entire process, 3A, it appears to cover only a scenario where a voluntary payment was made. I mean, of course, it says voluntary and others, but the thrust is more on voluntary payment made by mistake under DRC 03, etc. So again, this is while judicial precedents exist, I believe that this will also be an issue that will have to be decided by the GSTAT fairly soon, unless the government clarifies, and I sincerely hope that the government does clarify. Apart from pre-deposit, of course, there's a filing fee which is capped at rupees 50,000 and 5,000 for every sort of application, whether for inspection of records, any miscellaneous application, etc. It's 5,000. One question that I get asked very often is a waiver of pre-deposit possible? In 95% of the cases, the answer is no. Very, very few cases high courts have intervened and allowed that. Two cases I have mentioned here, one by Delhi High Court, where in the case of extreme financial hardship, the court said, okay, in this rare case, we will allow. and there was one by Allahabad High Court where it's an interesting premise because they said that the same issue has been decided in favor of the appellant in an earlier proceeding, so there should be no pre-deposit in this particular case. Uh, is it possible to ask the GSTAT itself to, using its inherent powers to waive pre-deposit? Bombay High Court has recently said that GSTAT has inherent powers to grant stay, but can it grant stay against pre-deposit? Again, bit of a technical question. I would think no, because GSTAT is a creature of the statute, and the statute is worded in a mandatory manner that there must be a pre-deposit. So I don't know if GSTAT can waive that. It is possible that one will have to approach the High Court for the same. Moving on to some of the procedural aspects, I mentioned that one has to approach GSTAT, file the appeal within 3 months from date of communication. Important to distinguish 3 months, not 90 days. So if you have received the order in appeal on 1st of January, you need to file by 1st of April, not 3rd or 4th of April by counting 90 days, just because February is a shorter month. So remember, this distinction becomes critical in some cases. Condonation of delay is available, that power is available if there is sufficient cause, but only up to 3 months. So you get 3 plus 3, that's the max. You don't get any extension beyond that. GSTAT may refuse an appeal where the disputed amount does not exceed 50K. Once an appeal is filed, and this is important, once an appeal is filed, the other side may file cross objections. Now, bear in mind, cross objection is not reply. Okay, cross objection is like a counter appeal. So if you say you're an SSC department, you have a favorable order from a commissioner appeal stage, you disagree with one or two aspects of the order, but overall it's positive, so you have not appealed. But department appeals. This is your chance. Within 45 days, you file cross objection and you raise a objection against that particular part of the appeal which you disagree. So this is 45 days up to 40, another 45 days condonable period is there. Second is the reply. So I mentioned cross objection is different from reply. If you don't want to file a cross objection, you can file a reply within 1 month, like a counter. Rejoinder is not an automatic right. If as someone who has filed the application or someone who has filed the appeal, you don't automatically get a right of rejoinder once you receive a reply from the other side. You have to specifically ask the permission of the GST Appellate Tribunal that I need to respond to this, need to specifically rebut some of these points. And once you get a permission, only then you can file a rejoinder. Interestingly, the law says that the GSTAT has to hear and decide every appeal within 1 year as far as possible. As far as possible, Delhi High Court has interpreted that you can't treat it as just mere words, mere verbiage. You have to really try to ensure that 1 year time limit is adhered to, and only if you cannot absolutely do that is a delay permissible. Of course, we can't expect this 1 year timeline to be adhered to in the first couple of years, but eventually I'm hopeful that we will move very close to this. Another interesting nuance to remember is in cases where the tax amount or the amount in dispute basically is less than 50 lakhs, uh, and it does not involve any question of law, then the president or the vice president can make this hearable by a single member bench. The question is, of course, that if it is by a single member bench, clearly then it does not have a question of law. And as we know that GST appeals to a high court are admissible only if a case involves a substantial question of law. So what it means is, if an appeal has been heard by a single member of GST, there can be no statutory appeal to high court. There could only potentially be a writ petition. So one needs to be very careful. If your case is getting referred by the president to the single member, you may want to apply your mind to think, do you want that? Do you want to oppose that, file an application opposing that, etc., etc. Now, quickly moving on to the GST Appellate Tribunal rules. What one major aspect, most important aspect that I want to highlight is GST Appellate Tribunal has massive inquisitorial powers. What it means is it can really be act like a investigating agency. It can really act proactively to find out real facts. Uh, it is not bound by your grounds of appeal. So, if I file an appeal, I cannot argue and urge additional grounds unless, of course, the GSTAT permits me to do that. GSTAT in deciding my appeal is not bound by my grounds of appeal at all. It can go beyond that. It can amend favorable orders to rectify error apparent on record. So technically, it can even enhance liability or reduce refund that you might have already gotten at a first appeal stage. So one needs to be really cognizant of this power of GST. Of course, GSTAT will give you a sufficient chance to hear your side if it chooses to do so. But this power exists and we need to be cognizant of that. Secondly, and I think this is a point that has been emphasized in various other forums as well, various other webinars as well, it is the last fact-finding forum. Like the SESTAT, this is the last forum for factual adjudication. This is your last chance to seek cross-examination if you have not sought it at a lower level. This is your last chance to challenge any electronic evidence, WhatsApp chats, emails that have been copied, your server data that might have been cloned. Any of those things, if you have not challenged at a lower level, this is your last chance to challenge. You file an application before the GSTAT. Remember, you don't have a natural right. By default, you don't have a right to bring in new evidence. It is by permission of GSTAT. If the GSTAT allows, it finds sufficient cause, or it feels that at a lower level you are not allowed to present this evidence or not allowed to carry out requisite cross-examination, GSTAT may allow you to do that. Please use this right, because it is very, very important. You will not get any chance to alter your facts, to correct your facts after the GSTAT level. Also, evidence may be, once permitted by the GSTAT, it can be evidence may be tendered by affidavit, and on that affidavit, say you want to file an expert opinion on a technical classification issue, cross-examination will be permitted, as is permitted today in SESTAT, including cross-examination via video conferencing. And GSTAT may direct someone else, some other officer, maybe a commissioner, maybe a commission repeal, to oversee a cross-examination process without instead of doing it itself to save time. So that enabling provision is there. GSTAT can also summon people, including government servants, require production of documents, and issue commissions for examination of witnesses or documents. Now, these are powers that would be, I am assuming, used extra in extraordinary circumstances. But if you are fighting a GST litigation which has resulted from a very, very harsh investigation, where a lot of your rights as a taxpayer, as a citizen of this country, were trampled upon, maybe this is the time to correct some of those errors. If you were not given reasons to believe for a search seizure in your premises, if your data, if your private data was taken away, cloned, if your WhatsApp messages were cloned without following the due process of law, I think this is the time to get GSTAT to summon the relevant officers to ask the right questions, to sort of get behind some of those secret documents as to on what basis was a search ordered, was there reason to believe for so and so decision. So that power, and the power to summon a particular tax officer, exists with the GSTAT. They can even send a commission of inquiry. They can empower a officer or a member of the registry to go and examine witnesses in a different location, or examine documents, etc. So these strong powers exist with the GSTAT, and it is on us to sort of be able to use them. Some of the procedural aspects in terms of listing of cases, if you want urgent listing, you have to try and do it before 12 noon on the previous day. You have to file an application or a appeal or whatever you want urgent listing for. Only in exceptional cases, with the permission of the president, will a delay beyond 12 noon be allowed. So what I foresee is like what we see in Supreme Court or in high courts. There will be a lot of mentionings that will happen before the president once this is functioning in a full-fledged manner, because a lot of people will be queuing up for urgent listings, etc., by seeking mentionings. Adjournments, power of adjournments are acknowledged in the law, but only up to 3 adjournments in favor of a party. So one party doesn't get more than 3. So total of 6 adjournments can be technically possible, 3 for each side. Uh, if you want to, after filing, carry out certain corrections which are purely clerical or grammatical or arithmetical in nature, you can approach the registrar, and it's not necessary that the other side needs to be notified. If it's a minor correction, registrar can get it done ex parte also. Interlocutory applications, of course, are very, very critical for everything. I mean, whether you want to transfer a case from multiple state benches to the principal bench, if you want to seek a rectification, condonation of delay, all of those things. Am I audible? Okay, okay.
Yes, yes, Sudhir.
Okay, okay. So, if you want to seek a condonation of delay, any of those things, you have to file, pay 5,000 rupee fee, and file a interlocutory obligation. This is going to be one of the most frequently used provisions and rules. So, do go through this rule very carefully at leisure. And lastly, we have spoken that this is a digital first tribunal. Everything is electronic: filing, processing of appeals, applications, scrutiny notices, deficiency memos. Everything will be online. Very, very critical to keep monitoring the GSTAT portal regularly, because there is not going to be any other form of communication. It's quite unlikely that there will be any other form of communication. Documents that are required to accompany an appeal. I'll not get into the details, but one specific aspect on which I get asked a lot is requirement of a certified copy, that it must be accompanied by a certified copy of the order. Certified copy doesn't need to be obtained from the department necessarily. Your authorized representative, your lawyer, your chartered accountant can certify it as a certified copy as per the GSTAT rules. Uh, the post appeal filing, there will be a very important phase where scrutiny will happen in the registry. Registry will notify you of defects. Defects will have to be removed within 7 days. If there is an issue which has not been removed, you believe this is okay, registry believes no, this is a defect, there will be a hearing before registrar, and if it still remains unresolved, registrar will list the appeal with defects before the bench. And this is where, I was mentioning, would payment of pre-deposit by way of credit be allowed? Would adjustment of earlier payments be allowed? I think a lot of those issues would get notified as defect by the registrar and will be sent to the GSTAT bench for deciding. Lastly, on this slide, who could be the respondents? The law says commissioner concerned, and normally it should be a fairly easy decision. But in case of pan India show cause notices, DGGI initiated notices, who is that commissioner concerned? Is it the one who issues the SCN? Is it the one who issued the OIO, or the jurisdictional commissioner? I hope that a circular will be issued to cover that specific scenario. Also, can additional relevant parties be impleaded? Like if you want to implead your job worker, if you want to implead a co-noticee, if you are taking grounds against a specific co-noticee, or say a CHA, or a supplier in a supplier recipient reconciliation issue, you should be allowed to implead them, because they may be necessary parties in a particular dispute. It's not clear whether you can implead them. If you implead them as a respondent, will defect be created? So I think this is another aspect where one needs clarity. GSTT proceedings are normally to be open to public. I mean, if you, which is obvious, but interestingly, it says that you have the right to ask for a particular hearing to be private, and more interestingly, it says GSTAT may exclude any particular person from hearing. So I don't know how this will work out in practice. GSTAT will say you, Mr. X, cannot attend, but everyone else can attend. But this power exists with the GSTAT, and I found it quite curious. Referral to larger bench, I think, is obvious. We don't need to spend time. Rule 53 to 55, code diary and order sheet. These are very, very crucial documents, because these will contain the entire records of proceedings of a particular appeal. And if there is any debate, is there any element of doubt, if you want to find out what exactly happened, you can pay 5,000 rupees, seek an inspection of records. And if the registrar agrees for your reasons to seek an inspection, he will allow a specific time in which such inspection can be carried out under supervision of someone from the registry. This is a right which we often as litigators use in high courts and other forums. Presumably this will also be quite frequently invoked in GSTAT as well. So what do you need to see? These are the two most important documents: the court diary and the order sheet file. Pronouncement of orders is supposed to happen within 30 days from the final hearing. If it is adhered to, I think it will be spectacular. That's a very expedited sort of timeline. One question that comes up repeatedly is what happens in a single versus multiple GSTAT appeal scenario. Uh, Say in the case of Pan India SCNs by DGGI, we have a circular which said that Pan India SCNs are to be adjudicated by a common adjudicating authority, And first appeal will lie to the Commissioner Appeals, where in whose jurisdiction that common adjudicating authority is present. So far, so good. We have seen that even when a single OIO is passed by this common adjudicating authority, each jurisdictional commissioner issues demand orders in DRC 07 for that particular state's GSTIN. And I mean, the practice is well established in the context of first appeal. But what happens in the context of in a scenario where multiple APL forms get uploaded in each GSTIN across India? Do you need to file multiple appeals or just one appeal? My answer, and there is some amount of debate in the fraternity on this, but my answer, based on a reading of Rule 18.2 of the GSTAT rules, is that only one appeal needs to be filed because there is one OIO. Is it possible that in some cases it could be objected to on ground in some of the benches? It is possible, and like I said, this could be one of those things where defects get created, or you might need to seek an interim order from a GSTAT or maybe even a high court. But to my mind, Rule 18.2 is quite clear. Another scenario that might come out is if there are multiple OIOs but one order in appeal. In that case, there has to be multiple GSTAT appeal. This is also a scenario clearly covered under the rules. One order in appeal, multiple notices, for example, company and senior employees, here too, multiple GSTAT appeals will have to be filed. Very specifically, it emerges from the rules. Of course, this is fairly commonsensical. It happens today also, but worth remembering these specific scenarios. What happens after the GSTAT order? We have already spoken about it. From principal bench, you'll go to Supreme Court, from state benches to High Court. And if you win, you can file for a refund of the pre-deposits already taken. Let's quickly spend some time on GSTAT versus writ remedy. Okay, when should you still go to writ? Should you go to GSTAT only? What are the parameters that one needs to keep in mind? Let's look at the nature of the issue. Is it purely factual, involving facts, reconciliations, detailed evidence, or is it legal/constitutional? If it's the latter, High Court makes more sense. If it's the former, then GSTAT makes more sense. But then you need to figure out, what is the extent of am I comfortable paying such a high pre-deposit? Do I have enough credit or enough cash to make this pre-deposit and get this money locked up for maybe 2, 3, 4 years? Even though there is a hope for return with interest. So that's the crucial call. And strategically, then, do I go to High Court, seek a remand on issues like, say, consolidated show cause notice, same show cause notice for multiple years have been issued. On those sort of technical grounds, should I go and seek a remand and try my luck again at an adjudication stage? So those are calls, strategic calls that one needs to take. We'll need to see whether a particular high court, I mean, the high court that you think of, you're thinking of invoking, are there very specific and favorable precedents from that high court, or very specific adverse precedents from that high court? Because that will very strongly determine your strategy. If it's a favorable decision, it's very easy to rely upon that and get a stay. So needs to be factored in. Similarly, is it an industry issue that merits a high court decision? There is, say, a larger question of law involved. Maybe it's worth approaching the high court then. Also look at the kind of time that a particular high court is taking in disposing. What is the track record? So I think all of these things will need to be seen to decide whether or not one approaches high court or Supreme Court. Suffice to say, like I said at the beginning, that writ is an exceptional remedy. So if your cases are that of violation of natural justice, where, for example, you have you have not been served the relied upon documents, or there is clear non-application of mind, or there is no opportunity, no proper opportunity of personal hearing, cross-examination has not been given, which has caused a lot of prejudice. These are cases where one could go on the basis of natural justice. But if you see the trend in high courts are asking, can't you take the same argument before an appellate authority or the GSTAT? And if your answer is yes, but I have to pay pre-deposit, more often than not, high courts are not being very sympathetic about it. So this, this is something that's a gamble at times. But natural justice is a very, very well recognized, exception to writ remedy, and one could rely on it. Or, for example, if there is a jurisdictional issue, if the very levy of tax is in question, if a provision is being invoked which is completely uninvocable. For example, there is, for say, no allegation to back up a Section 74 show cause notice, but with just one line, they have, and as many show cause notices do, they have invoked 74. That's a jurisdictional issue. Things like taxability of extra neutral alcohol, taxability of GST on intercorporate guarantees. In all of these litigations, jurisdictional issues have been raised, or time barred show cause notices. So all of these cases, technically one can approach High Court, but it is at the end of the day taking a chance, because some of these points could potentially be possibly argued before GSTAT. So we'll have to see what are the grounds where GSTAT cannot decide, and it is only a High Court which decides, and there one could possibly chase. Cases of violation of fundamental rights, obviously you can go if there is attachment of bank account, blocking of credit ledgers, detention of goods without due process, cancellation of registration. I mean, you can't wait for GSTAT to come into force and decide and hear your cases. One has to approach the High Court because time will be of essence. And of course, if you want to challenge any specific constitutional validity of any section, rule, I mean, we have had challenges to time extension notifications under 168A, Rule 9610. Principles of mutuality has been invoked to challenge specific amendment to GST law. So all of those scenarios, of course, writ is the best option. You should not go to GST Appellate Tribunal. And you'll need to also, like I said, in your calculus as to writ versus GSTAT, need to think about some of these aspects in a writ remedy also, because GSTAT will have some stability in terms of the bench, at least for some years. In high courts, there is a frequent changes in roster that leads to inconsistency, delays. Uh, it's not tax specific forum, so obviously it becomes a very time consuming process for final hearings. There are repeated and unlimited number of hearings. Counter department takes a lot of time to file counters, etc. That itself drags on for a long time. All of these things would have to be factored in the decision making in writ versus, because it is possible that if you have to pay a 4-5 crore kind of a pre-deposit, then all of these challenges might seem small, and you might still want to opt for a writ remedy. Now let's spend some time on the first GSTAT order that has been issued in the case of Sterling and Wilson. This is an EPC company who had a registration in the state of Orissa, and like I mentioned earlier, ordinarily they should have gone to the Orissa bench, but based on that Bombay High Court judgment that we spoke about earlier, it went to the principal bench itself. It was heard by the single member, by the president himself. Uh, because probably it was the amount at stake, that disputed tax amount was only rupees 27 lakhs, so less than 50 lakhs. And the president, in his discretion, decided this does not involve a question of law. It was a GSTR 1 versus 3B mismatch for the financial year 18-19. Interesting takeaway is that 4 virtual hearings happened, and the whole matter was heard and disposed of in 1 month, less than a month, in fact. All of them happened virtually, 26 December to 21st January 26. The hearings are over, and the judgment came on 11th of February. I mean, we may not see every matter moving so quickly, but this is, of course, reassuring. The pace and the proactiveness with which this has been dealt with. On merits, what happened is, like I said, this was a mismatch issue. The appellant explained the mismatch through a detailed reconciliation, credit notes, debit notes, advance adjustments, and it was undisputed. It showed that everything was duly reflected in the books of accounts and GSTR 3B. But yes, GSTR 1 was not amended because there were technical constraints at that time. A lot of filings happened manually, so they could not, amend the GSTR 1. The first appellate authority, the Commissioner of Appeals, accepted the absence of intent to evade, but still confirmed the tax and interest. They said that ITC reversal by your recipients of the credit note has not been proved, and the debit note, credit note, while reflected in the books of accounts, it's not reflected in GSTR 1. They were not duly amended. GSTAT said, you know what? By your own admission, there is no intention to evade. This is purely a reconciliation issue. We need to keep in mind that at that time, it was still we are emerging from COVID. Uh, at the time of the first appellate hearing, it was the first appellate hearing happened around 21-22, and that filing errors happened in 2018 when the portal was not yet fully stabilized. So those things will have to be kept in mind, especially for an honest taxpayer. And a fresh opportunity should be given to the appellant to go before the original proper officer who issued the show cause notice. And one specific issue that came up was the detailed reconciliation was submitted by the appellant for the first time before GSTAT, not earlier. The department objected, said that you are a second appeal forum, you can't now sit and look at new evidence. He should not, appellant should not be allowed to do that. GSTAT emphasized its role as the last fact-finding authority. A lot of paragraphs are spent on that. That unlike a civil procedure code second appeal, I as GSTAT have the right to get into facts. Ultimately, though, it did not get into the factual analysis. It remanded it in a manner of speaking. It said that this exercise needs to be done by the original adjudicating authority, the proper officer who issued the notice. There is one specific observation in the context of 74 versus 73, which is important. Uh, the original notice was issued under Section 74. The Commissioner of Appeals said that no, 74 is not invocable. There is no fraudulent intent. There is no evidence of suppression, etc. So 73, and it decided the matter under 73. The GSTT said, no, that's not permissible. If you look at 75.2, if you look at Circular 254 of 25, once 74 is held to be inapplicable, it is that original proper officer who issued the 74 SCN who needs to redetermine. So it has to go back. Now, one might think that, this is unnecessary cyclical process that we are going to, you're sending it back to the officer, we are back to the starting point. But technically speaking, this is not incorrect. This is in line with the law. So my key takeaways, I mean, of course, one judgment does not qualify as a trend. We can't draw any conclusions from that. But it sets the tone. And I essentially hope it sets the tone, because the tone that I take away from this is that the STAT is going to be human and reasonable. It took into account the initial difficulties. It took a very pragmatic approach. It gave leeway to a honest taxpayer. Once it decided that this is a honest taxpayer, this is a merely a reconciliation issue, the case of suppression, Section 74, etc., have been dropped. It gave the taxpayer a second chance. Thirdly, very evident that there is a very clear grasp on legal analysis, both on the GST sections, GST circulars, GST instructions, as well as first principles of law, as well as equitable principles. And to my great relief, it is not pro-revenue. I mean, advanced ruling authorities under GST have been criticized for being pro-revenue, at least on the evidence of this one order, the first order from GSTAT. That doesn't seem to be the case. Of course, we'll have to see how other benches, when they start functioning, they work. We'll need to keep in mind that a lot of members who have joined the various benches across India are joining. They do not come from a tax background. They come from a civil litigation background. It is possible that in many benches we might see a trend towards a slightly more technical emphasis on procedure, on the applications being filed in the right form, within the right timeline, following the due process, etc. But one hopes that the tone and tenor set by this first GSTAT order will be followed in the days to come. With that, I think I have reached the last slide of my presentation, so I'll be happy to take questions, etc.
Sharing your valuable views on this important topic with the participants. Can I just run it on the screen so that it is easy for you to take up?
Sure, sure.
Is it visible to you?
Yeah, it's coming. Yeah, it is. It is. So I'll go one by one. I think what happens to pre-deposit in cases where this is an interesting one, that you know what happens if the the first appeal, the demand is reduced on and you have already paid a total of 10%, numerically speaking. See, my answer technically would be, it says 10% of the disputed tax amount. So disputed tax amount after first appeal will be the lower amount, and to that extent, I don't think any further pre-deposit would be needed. Having said that, I mean, knowing how technical some members of registry can be, this could be an issue. But I'm hopeful that if this is flagged as a deficiency or defect by the registry, it will get referred to the GSTAT, and on a plain reading of the provision, they will agree with my interpretation that no further this thing is needed, no further pre-deposit is needed. The second query is cap of INR 20 crore on pre-deposit shall be determined. Yeah, so like I said, I mean, I don't think one needs to technically file more than one appeal just because there are more than one APL force. But yes, because of the lack of clarity that I highlighted, in case it happens, it is technically possible that one may end up paying more than 20 CR, because for each APL 4, the 10% amount could be less than 20 CR, and cumulatively it can go, even though if you treat it as one order in appeal against which you are appealing, the amount should have been lower, which is where I think it is important that government clarifies this aspect. And Avinash, this should be one of the things that from ASSOCHAM we should seek clarity on from the government. Especially because of the number of SCNs that get issued on a pan-India basis by DGGI. Question 3 is inherent conflict between tribunal being last fact-finding authority and requirement to place an additional. I think yes, I also think there is some sort of, I mean, given the high threshold that the law sets to apply and only on the discretion of GSTAT it will be allowed, it's a bit counterintuitive. But I think in practice, I'm hoping that GSTAT registry as well as GSTAT members would be open and, take a much more pragmatic view of, by allowing new evidences, etc., to be allowed. One state bench GSTAT is applicable or binding on the short answer is yes. I covered this earlier in my presentation, because it is one central tribunal. So it is not that there is a hierarchy between tribunal benches. All benches are technically equal, and to that extent, coordinate benches decision is binding. Is it possible that there could be differences in opinion? Of course, but then it has to be referred to the larger bench. One needs to approach the president to refer the matter to the larger bench. Started filing GSTAT appeal. Fees payment made through GSTAT portal is not reflecting to further process. Could you please? So I think, see, there are two or three places where one could raise a issue. I think one, of course, is I have given the link in my presentation, which will be shared by ASSOCHAM. You can raise a ticket in the GSTAT portal grievance redressal forum that this is not reflecting. I hope you have kept screenshots of payment on all the necessary proofs that payment has actually been made. It is a reflection issue. It would also be useful to go and, I mean, I don't know the status in Chhattisgarh at the moment, if there is a registry, etc. But it is useful if you go and talk to them. It was useful if you flag this issue to jurisdictional grievance redressal officers of GST. Basically, flag it everywhere so that tomorrow no one can say you didn't tell me, and you are not deprived of your right to file an appeal. And secondly, if this drags on, remains unresolved for a long time, like I said earlier in my session, do file manually. Do file the appeal manually, because at least it shows that you were ready with the appeal. Because of this technical issues, you had no option but to file. It is possible when you go and approach for filing manually, they will not take it, they will not give you acknowledgement. Do a registered AD or send it by email, but keep a proof that this has been filed from your side and there is no fault at your end. Uh, Pre-deposit paid, question 6, pre-deposit paid via adjusting with electronic credit. If the cases win in favor of us, what is the refund process? To my mind, the refund process would be, the credit will come back. That is the way it has to occur. How will interest, fructify? How will interest work out in that case? I mean, remains to be seen at this point in time. Whether or not, because the interest provision does not specifically deal with this scenario, deal with a credit sort of scenario. So I don't know exactly how it will happen, but theoretically, if I have to read everything harmoniously, the credit should flow back to your credit ledger. And I don't know how the interest will be calculated. Uh, Possibly you can get it in cash, but if it's credit, they might use the same principle that SSCs use, that if I have availed and not utilized, I should not be, asked for any interest. They might try and use a similar logic and not pay interest on this. But yeah, good point. And I think, again, this is something that we could ask the government for clarification on behalf of ASSOCHAM. Question 7, taking a conservative approach, additional pre-deposit was made via DRC 03. Letter was filed. However, now either will have to pay it again as and apply for refund for previous, or we can utilize. So I mentioned the DRC 3A process. Look at DRC 3A form, and that there was a circular which was issued. So if you have paid by way of DRC 3, you should be able to get a set off of that amount by filing the DRC 3A form that is available on your GSTIN portal. Just find that out. If there is a issue, I mean, the circular should give you enough guidance. But I think from what I have heard, it's fairly seamless, this setting of process by filing DRC 3A form. Whether we have to file one GST table separate appeals in case of first OIA has been issued. We should combining both SSC appeal and I'm not very clear what this means. See, OIA will take into account both sides' arguments and pass an order. So, I mean, honestly, I'm unable to understand question number 8 on the screen. Yeah, I mean, maybe if you could type on the chat box in a more detail, I'll try and answer that. Question 9, we are facing issues in registration and filing of appeal with GSTAT Mumbai as jurisdiction linked with address of director who has address in another state. So this glitch, I mean, I hope you are liaising with the GSTAT Mumbai registry flag. I mean, if you're only liaising orally, please put it in writing. This is a hyper technical issue and should not be raised by them. Try and speak to the registrar if possible, and flag this as a issue in the GSTAT portal also. And any other grievance redressal, Maharashtra GST authorities have fairly well established grievance redressal forums. Try and reach out to those also, because this is completely absurd and hyper technical. This is unnecessary and should be really pushed back on. So I think
It's like to give some repeating.
Avinash, I am not able to get your voice.
yeah, even I couldn't hear clearly. It is a little patchy, Avinash.
Sir, one question is there in the chat box.
Okay, let me just go to the chat box. In the application tab, instead of company registered address, it is showing director's address. What is the remedy? So, I mean, you will see many such glitches. We are coming to know of many, because it is pulling data from multiple sources, etc. Like I said, the same protocol applies for all of these issues. Go to that link, flag the issue, talk to the registry, file letters, reach out to your grievance redressal officer of GST in that particular state. And if everything fails, you are at the cusp of end of litigation limitation period, file it manually. Let no one say tomorrow that you slept on your rights. There should be no lacuna from your side in terms of filing of an appeal.
See any other solutions?
Mr. Samamurthy, I have heard that Chennai, I mean, I've read your comment which says, unfortunately, in Tamil Nadu, registry is not available. Uh, I read somewhere that the Chennai tribunal has started functioning. In fact, there was a press release to that effect. So again, you are on the ground. I may be wrong, but if the registry is not working, at least the first initial steps that I mentioned, at least let's do that. Let's flag it in the system. Reach out to the jurisdictional commissioner's office. Flag this as a problem. I'm not saying you'll receive a solution, but let's not flag a problem because these things come in handy if at some point in time hopefully someone will be looking at these issues, like how all GST portal issues got litigated in 21, 22, etc., and screenshots taken at that time, difficulties highlighted at that time were relevant material for high courts to decide. Let's keep everything ready.
Yeah, so we have reached the end of our session. So thanks to Sudatta for making a very good and enriching presentation, and thanks to all the participants. So it was a very engaging one where there you have raised your queries, which uh, I feel to a larger extent has been addressed. And still, if you are facing challenges on the GSTAT portal, so you can direct your queries to Avinash or Sudipta so that we can try to address that, as well as if there are certain things which needs to be brought to notice of the government, that can be taken up from ASSOCHAM side. So once again, thanks everyone for joining the call and have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinash. Thank you, Nitin.
Bye.